Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board meeting of July the 19th. I'd like to begin this meeting with an acknowledgement that we are on the homelands in Victoria and Esquimalt of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, the Lekwungen speaking people, and want to respect the work that we're doing and the learning that we're doing on a path of reconciliation that both communities as well as the Victoria Police Department is undertaking. I'd also like to, before we officially get underway here and approve the agenda, just note that today is 3 weeks since the shooting that happened in Saanich at the Bank of Montreal. And we're very well aware of that because we canceled our police board meeting that afternoon. And for members of the public who are wondering why, that was why. This is the first public moment for the police board to speak since that time. And we did send out a statement right after the incident, just noting with thanks the courage of the Saanich and Vic PD officers that while everybody else was running away from the gunfire, they ran towards the gunfire in the interests of keeping our communities safe. It is quite remarkable that there were no public casualties with that amount of gunfire being exchanged. And I think that's a testimony and testament to the skill of our officers and the officers at Saanich PD. We have 3 officers who are still recovering, as does Saanich PD, and those are the ones who were directly injured. And also there were many people who didn't experience gunshot wounds that day, but nonetheless experienced the outfall of the trauma of being part of an incident like that. And we want the public to know that all of the officers are being well taken care of, well looked after, that they have and the department has the support of the board through this very challenging time. And I think really importantly, the support of the community through this really challenging time. So those are some remarks on behalf of the board, and we really will continue to monitor the recovery of the officers who were physically injured and make sure that all of the officers who experienced trauma on that day from their response are taken care of going forward. With those remarks made, I will ask for a motion to approve the public agenda. Thank you, Doug, seconded by Paul. And for the public, I'll note that we have in the room here at the police headquarters myself, Mayor Desjardins, board member Doug Crowder, board member Paul Schachter, and joining us online, we have board member Charlotte Huber, board member Sean Dillon, board member Bella Lee, and board member Michaela is on a very late time zone. She was in an earlier meeting, but it's probably, I think, 3:30 in the morning where she is. So she may be choosing to be on her vacation and not in the police board meeting at this time. Colleagues, I need a motion. Sorry, did I call the question? All those in favor of the agenda? Any opposed? Okay. Next are adoption of the minutes from May the 17th. Can someone move the minutes for adoption, please? Thank you, Sean. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Paul. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you for your update.
Sure. Thank you for that, Chair. And also, thank you for your kind and thoughtful comments. I know that they're heartfelt from the board, and I know they're much appreciated. And so I'll just start off with the BMO shooting as well. So we many thanks, many people to acknowledge. I wanted to first start off by acknowledging Acting Chief Colin Watson, who in my absence did an amazing job. Our leadership team that stepped up, including Deputy Chief Jason Lakeman, the inspector that was the critical incident commander for Saanich was Victoria Police Inspector Mike Brown. He did an amazing job of managing a highly complex crime scene. And post-incident, we continue to support our staff. We're doing everything that we can, not only to care for our 3 injured officers who suffered gunshot wounds veterans, all three of whom are released now from hospital and recovering at home, but also many of the other officers that responded in a support role to the incident that happened at the bank in Saanich. I'll start off with my activity report. There's a couple other updates after that. So my activity report is on page 3 of the agenda. So a number of things that I've done. Now it goes back till May because the June meeting was canceled. So I just started off from where we left off at the last update that I provided the board. So I was able to present quarter one's report to both Esquimalt Victoria Council during this reporting period, participated in the Victoria Day Parade. I was able to take time out to go to the grade 7 class at Central Middle School, participated in the Special Olympics Law Enforcement Torch Run. So really, as more and more events are starting to take place in the spring, coming into the summertime, spending more time outdoors, I had the honor of throwing out the first pitch at 2 of the Victoria Harbour Cats baseball games. One of them, which was attended by the Integrated Canine Unit. I've also have attended, as you can see, from July 2nd, the 4th, and the 5th, as I came back from my holiday, attending a number of the patrol briefings. I attended all of the patrol briefings, including Community Services Division, and meeting up with staff here at Vic PD post-incident to the shooting that happened at the BMO Bank. I also am pleased to report that we've had 8 new police officers join Vic PD. 6 officers graduated from the Police Academy on July the 8th, and we've hired 2 experienced officers from other police agencies on July the 12th. So that brings up 8 more officers to our front lines that we're able to offset some of the staffing pressures that we've been facing. And I know the board will probably ask me this question. We're almost, if I look at the numbers, we're probably about another 8 or 9 officers short of what our goal is, but we're well on that way under Deputy Chief Jason Lakeman and Inspector McCrae's leadership in HR. So that's the update that I have on my activity sheet, but I wanted to just update the board also on a couple other things. You know, if the board recalls from the last meeting, we had significant challenges with youth violence and youth congregating and gathering in downtown Victoria. This was of great importance to the board, and I had updated the board in the public session of the coordinated approach that we took, working with all the other police agencies, working across the region with school districts and educators and parents in encouraging youth not to gather, and if they were going to be coming downtown, not to bring weapons. Our coordinated approach did work over a number of weeks that this was a significant issue for downtown Victoria. So coupled with some enforcement, which led to some arrests of youth that were violent and had participated in assaulting other individuals or other youth that were gathering, it has really not been an issue in the last probably 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm just happy to report that it's been a collaborative effort on many fronts. And I want to just congratulate our Community Services Division and our frontline patrol officers and the work that they've done to mitigate this youth violence. Also wanted to just give a shout out to our community. The public support that we continue to see at Vic PD for our officers and staff, and I know that Chief Duffy continues to see it with his organization in Saanich, it's just been overwhelming. Their words can't really describe the heartfelt comments, the cards, the emails, the flowers, the baked goods, the number of Victorians that have contributed to the GoFundMe page, the Blue Hearts campaign that kind of grew a life of its own after Canada Day, when we started handing out the Blue Hearts in support of our 6 GBERT injured officers. It's just been heartwarming, and it's been deeply appreciative. And I know that our officers and staff are really, really appreciative, and words just cannot describe what this outpouring of support has meant to us. I will leave that as my chief's update. I know that our finance chair, Doug Crowder will talk a little bit about the council feedback from our 2023 budget. So I'll maybe add some comments when he provides his update at the committee level.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll turn to Mr. Crowder when we get to Finance Committee. To board members, are there any questions for the chief? Charlotte, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to just add to Chief Smanik's comments about the community outpouring. And a couple days after the incident, I was working at an event at a local nation that wasn't within Vic PD's area. And at that event, there were RCMP officers who were participating in Indigenous dances with the youth and spending several hours at the community participating. And at the end of the event, I was driving many of the youth from the nation home who lived in urban areas. And one young gentleman in my car had said, wow, don't officers have a tough job? Because 3 days ago, they're getting shot at and putting their lives on the line. And today they're in our community dancing and participating in our culture. And it was a really profound moment. And I think it's really a true statement that officers at Vic PD and elsewhere have a lot of things participating in public safety and putting their lives on the line and also building relationships. And I just wanted to share that comment because I thought it was really powerful coming from a young youth who just had that thought.
Thank you very much for sharing that really thoughtful comment. Other comments or questions for the chief? Yeah, Barb, go ahead.
Thanks. Two questions. First, Chief, this great news about getting more officers. I'm wondering how many of the ones that we have taken on took up the signing bonus?
Oh, yeah, okay, so that's a great question. So the signing bonus is only applicable to experienced police officers joining Vic PD. So the 6 police recruits would not be eligible for that. It'll only be the 2 experienced officers. But in addition to that, Deputy, do you know how many, what we're at and the number of experienced officers we've hired since we put the incentive out there?
We're hiring so fast, I'm having trouble keeping track, but Inspector McCray would have that answer.
Inspector, go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we are at 9 since we introduced the new program. We actually haven't given out the money yet to any individual just because they have to have worked here for 6 months before we actually are handing over checks. But we've got 9 committed. Not all of them, I should say, have officially started. We have 3 starting in the middle of September, another one starting in October. So 4 that haven't started yet, but have committed and said they're coming. And we have 3 additional that are very close. They're into our background stage. So I suspect we're going to be at 11 or 12 no later than the early part of the fall. And continuing, just because the chief brought it up, continuing on what I would describe as the good news front, because we don't always have great news as it relates to recruiting. We do have 6 additional officers graduating from the academy on November the 10th. So from the middle of May till November 10th, hitting the streets right to our front lines, we have 22, and this is assuming that all of the exempts that we think are going to work out, the 3 that I mentioned that haven't that are into their background stage. We will have 22 new police officers on the road between exempts or experienced officers, as we call them, and recruits, graduated recruits, which is great news.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Anything else?
Yeah, I had a second
Oh, sorry, go
question.
ahead, Barb.
Well, it's not really a question. Chief, I wanted to have this mentioned somewhere, but I really want you to mention it. And it's about the move of West Division from the old digs into the new digs, because the community is excited, as are the officers, as per social media. And so wondering if there's something that you or Inspector Brown could speak about?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. So for those members that may not be aware, the township is going to be building a new public safety building. And so that is tremendous news. It's exciting news. We're looking forward to it. But with that comes a transition for the Esquimalt Fire Department and the Police Department, which share the public safety building as it currently is, which has to be demolished. So I know that Inspector Mike Brown couldn't be available today. He had another commitment. But I know that the township has been working closely with the fire department and the police department in having a transition to what it would look like to provide public safety services during this transition. And I know that there's been lots of thought that's been given to maintaining a continuity of operations on the police side. This week, I ended up calling Inspector Mike Brown yesterday, and he was in the middle of moving boxes and they were loading them up. And but there's a tremendous amount of excitement. I know there's some minor touch-ups to do, and so we can't move it into place quite yet. But that transition is going quite well, and we will make sure after this week, make sure that we're communicating with the township residents as to what services we'll be able to continue on providing with the temporary services while the new public safety building is going on.
Deputy Chief Laidman wanted to add something, I think.
Just to add, I was out in the township yesterday and I had a tour when they were moving in, and what the township has done to the space is outstanding. Our people are going to be very comfortable there. There's a lot of room, and it's going to be a very nice transition for us. So thrilled, actually. I was asking where my office was.
It's the old library site,
Yes.
which is right in the town square area. So it's absolutely a wonderful place to have our Vic PD West Division.
And just one final thing, and just for the officers, they feel welcome. They know that these dates are actually a really good option, considering what some of the other options might have been. So they're quite happy with that. Looking forward to the move. They do want to get it done now and get settled in.
And Doug, go ahead.
I was just going to comment about the light note that it's the temporary facility for the Esquimalt division is actually on the ground floor of the township hall. That means that part of our co-chair is truly giving some oversight.
Thank you for that. Just going back to recruitment, maybe this is a question for Inspector McCray. Have we noticed any uptick or any interest? I noticed it was a few months ago now at the bottom of every single press release, it says we're hiring. The pillars at the front of the building, they look so great. We're hiring. I was at a community event. It wasn't Africa Fest.
Festival Mexicano.
Festival Mexicano, and Vic PD had a tent there and was hiring. So are we starting to, those are really great initiatives because it's visibility in the community and it sends out a strong signal that this is your police department and we'd love you to come and work here. So hard to track whether those things are getting traction yet, but I think they're excellent, and just wanted to get your take on whether we're starting to see any resonance with the community and those kinds of initiatives.
Yeah, so there's no doubt it's created some good conversation, created a little bit more buzz. We're also doing several other things, including using our community engagement division even more than we previously were. We are scheduled to meet to discuss this a bit further, not until September. Reason being, we wanted to give it a few months to see if we can actually track and notice any statistical change or increase and try and determine then what is working. Let's enhance that. What isn't working? Okay, let's modify it or remove it from the different steps and different things that we're doing. So I don't have any firm numbers to say, yes, that's working or no, it's not. I can say anecdotally from our members who've been either attending those events, particularly the events, they're having great feedback, great interaction. We had one of our people build just to help create, a bit of an atmosphere around a different tent or the tent that we have set up, create and build a not pickleball, but beanbag, yeah, cornhole board, a Vic PD cornhole board, and anything like that we can do to help create that conversation, have people stop and say hi, and then build from there. And it's, I'd say anecdotally going well, but no, I can't say statistically yet, but we're meeting, like I say, in September to take a better look at it.
That's great. Yeah, just a couple more comments on that. I think even thinking of it as a long-term recruitment strategy and being out in those communities like, Africa Fest and Festival Mexicana. I know that the India Mail is not happening this year, but there's like 47 festivals in Victoria and a whole number in Esquimalt. And I know we don't want to overtax people by being everywhere, but you know, even if you're hitting that 12 or 13-year-old that's interacting in a positive way and thinking about this as a future career, as well as the adults who might want to start work here tomorrow. So just, I think that's really well done. And you know, yeah, keep us posted on what the results are.
Thanks very much for the comments, and I couldn't agree with you more. Some of these strategies are long-term, and this with other things, I think we'll set our predecessors, or is it successors, the people who follow us up to success.
Those are your successors. Okay, anything else for the chief before the chief moves on to his equity, diversity, and inclusion engagement update? Okay, chief, please go ahead with this update.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So I'm just on page 4 of the package. And so it just lists in chronological order some of the equity, diversity, and inclusion engagement events that I've attended. I attended a virtual meeting with Being Muslim in Victoria, met with a Special Olympics BC athlete who wanted to thank the officers for their bravery and courage for those who responded to the BMO shooting. Mayor Helps, you touched on Festival Mexicano that we attended, and we appreciate the shout out. I got there shortly after you had left with your opening remarks, and my team was impressed that you had actually said Big PD is actively recruiting. So thank you for mentioning that in your opening remarks. I attended the Pasaki South Asian kind of community festival at Topaz Park, which was actually on the same day as Festival Mexicano. Deputy Laidman, myself, and a number of other Vic PD staff, including Staff Sergeant Jen Ames, who's the co-chair for the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Committee, attended the Aboriginal Coalition and Homelessness Relationship Building event, which was last week on the 11th. And this morning, Mayor Desjardins and board member Doug Crowder were with a number of Vic PD reps and myself, and we had the privilege and the honor of participating in the canoe blessing ceremony for Vic PD's canoe, and it was extremely humbling event to be there. In fact, the champion for this and the project lead has been Deputy Chief Laidman. So Jason, why don't I just get you to say a few words about this morning's event?
Well, thanks, Chief. It was very moving and humbling. There was I won't get into the whole series of events because there was some lifting in the background. I worked with Lekwungen elders to get this off the ground, and Marianne Thomas and Elmer George in particular, Speaker Mike Charlie and Marianne's son and daughter Matt and Marianne, Marianne they called her, were there and did the ceremony for us. But I have to say that Marianne Thomas really held my hand and guided me through this whole process. It was very important for us to have the blessing of the canoe. It actually protects the paddlers when it gets into the water, when it gets into the traditional highway. And that was very important. It was very apparent, the importance of it as the ceremony was going through. It was a quiet ceremony, or a small ceremony, but like I say, very, very important. And the canoe it's going to be about paddling, but it's also going to be about relationship building in the community. It's going to be a focal point. We're going to build a team. We had more offers today to be part of that team and guide us through our series of paddles and invites to various events that are going to take place throughout the year. So it's quite an exciting and humbling morning for sure. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy. And just one final comment about, I know the board is aware of the work that we're doing, but I talked about the Aboriginal Coalition and the work we're doing with the Indigenous Street family. But this is something that Vic PD is committed to doing over the long term. And we've been at the table building partnerships, building trust. And as Deputy Laidman just commented on, we feel that this canoe is really going to be a significant avenue for us to connect with Indigenous youth, Indigenous communities. And it's going to really help us in our efforts to reconciliation and truly building trust. And we're quite excited about this program. And one of the first steps was to get the blessing ceremony done. And now we'll be working with the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation artists and the youth to do the artwork for the canoe. So there's multiple steps here. It's not just about actually launching and paddling in our communities with it. So super proud of the work. And again, I want to just thank Deputy Laidman for the work that he's been doing off the side of his desk to get this up and running.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Chair, Co-Chair Desjardins, I know you were there as well at the blessing. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, just that it really was a great experience this morning. And the words that I came away with, heart, healing. They mentioned a lot about healing through canoe journey. Prayer, believing that mindset must be positive. And because you're all working together. And so that final word of relationships. I look forward to seeing the team and hearing of the first journey, because I think it will be significant.
When is the first journey?
Too early to say, because there's a number of steps that we're working towards, and yeah, so we don't know yet, but certainly we'll share that with the board and our community when that's gonna happen.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Maybe
Charla, and then I'll go to Doug. Charla, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and my apologies for not being able to attend the ceremony this morning. I think that this is a really fantastic initiative, and a big thanks to Jason Laidman for all of his work. I know he's been working on this for years and years, and I attended some meetings with him, and Jason just does a phenomenal job engaging with Indigenous communities and doing that work with a really high level of respect. And I know that Jason leads the way in this, and as well as other leaders, to build those relationships. And another thing I wanted to note that I think is so fantastic about this project and other initiatives like that is often historically Indigenous people, when they're in an uneven power dynamic, historically Indigenous people have always lost. So sometimes people are leery of uneven power dynamics, but I think that with this canoe and that partnership, the interesting thing is it's the Indigenous communities leading the way and Indigenous communities guiding, and it's Vic PD and other community members who are there to listen and learn. And I think that that's a really valuable way to build these relationships and to have Indigenous communities and Indigenous culture guide the way, where other folks are there to listen and learn. And I just think it's really wonderful. So thank you for all your work.
Thanks, Charla. Yeah, thanks for that insight. This process is being guided by the Lekwungen people and not the other way around. So really thanks for calling that out, sharing that with us. Doug, did you want to add anything?
No, other than I felt very honored and humbled to be there today. It was quite rewarding. I love seeing Mary Ann Thomas again.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to committees updates, and this is on page 5 to 42 of the agenda. And the public will notice that we've got 2 months worth of updates because the June board meeting was canceled as noted rather. And the biggest reports are from finance, because we've got monthly overtime financial reports and the monthly financial update as well. So Doug, I don't know if there's anything new or well, I guess Director Hercombe's not here, but is there anything you want to highlight from the overtime or the monthly financial reports, and then we can go to talk about the budget?
Yeah, I should, before I wanted to bring up.
Please go ahead. Yep, the floor is yours.
But first, the overtime reports for both the June and the July committee reports. I had nothing further to add to Steve's excellent summary of those things. And I might add that Steve is still on a well-deserved vacation, so hopefully nobody's going to ask any tough financial questions. In regards to the financial report as of June 27th, we're slightly over our 46% of our budget year. We're slightly over that at 48% in our spending. And that is largely because of the large amount of overtime that we've been spending and front-end loaded costs such as Canada pension and UEI premiums, stuff like that. They largely disappear in the latter half of the year. So I think Steve would conclude, and I would agree with him, that the spending is quite in control. And don't know if there's any questions on the overtime or financial report from the board at this time before I go on to other items.
Okay, are there any questions from the board on the financial or overtime reports? And again, the board saw these at committee and they're here for the public to peruse as part of the board meeting. Okay, please go ahead. I don't see anyone asking questions.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to touch briefly on the upcoming 2023 very preliminary provisional budget process. We did undertake, myself and the chief undertook consultations with both municipalities, mayor and councils last week, and I'd like to say that I thought they were very, very productive. And the input that we received, I think, was very well taken, and I appreciate that. I want to thank both the councils for that effort. Next week on July 26th, I think, we are having a camera board meeting to just do a deep dive on the initial preliminary budget, which is based on the feedback we received from councils. And the other thing I should just note here, and I think it's actually in one of the committee update reports here, is that once every 4 years, the timelines for doing the consultations and the meetings with the mayors and councils become rather difficult because it's election year. So I think all the parties have agreed that at least the joint Victoria board and both councils meeting is actually being deferred until December 6th. So it gives both new councils time to get their seats warm before they get into this stuff. So I don't think there's too many other changes involved at this time. And one more point I want to bring up, but again, any questions on the budget?
Any questions on the consultation with both councils? No, I don't see any. So
Thank you. Okay, and last thing, and this, we brought this up at both the consultation meetings last week, and I'm probably get the chief to elaborate on it better than me, but the Justice Institute of BC some time ago notified the police departments and boards that they will no longer be funding any deficits from the police academy training. And they were initially giving us a notice that this would be effective April 2024, and then much more recently, they sent a letter, my understanding without explanation, advancing that date to April 2022, which becomes, if not difficult, probably impossible for people to comply with. So we strenuously objected as a board on behalf of the police department and asked both Township of Esquimalt and City of Victoria to also consider protecting them both. So for that, I want to thank both municipalities for that. I would ask Chief to add to that.
Sure. Thank you for that, Doug. So it's nice to see the township's letter to Wayne Rideout, Assistant Deputy Minister, Director of Police Services, in the package, in our package today, referencing that switch. So the challenge has been, as the board is aware, is we don't have our budget set to accommodate these extra costs. And so without any warning, they essentially 2 years earlier, the provincial governments downloaded these costs onto the police department to say you must fund these, and it's up to you to kind of come up with the money. And that is just, it's just seems disingenuous to do that without any discussion or any warning. I know that the BC Municipal Chiefs of Police have written a letter back to government as well, asking to come to the table to have a discussion, at least postponing it till next year, if not till April of 2024, which is what, as Doug said, was the original agreement. Financial impact. I just want to make sure that you understand this. For 2022, the financial impact from Inspector McRae's HR team is it's about $115,000. So it's a significant amount of money. But when we look at 2023, which will be the full calendar year, the impact, now it obviously is going to depend on how many police officers that we hire. So it varies, but I'll give you a range. The impact for 2023 is anywhere between $430,000 to $500,000. we just do not have the capacity even next year to add these type of costs to our budget, but we're forced to do so unless the provincial government comes to the table and we come to some sort of an agreement. So Doug, thanks for allowing me to kind of highlight this, and I know that this has been a great concern for the board as well.
Yeah, please go ahead, Doug.
Is it, an upcoming meeting with Rightos worth putting that on the agenda?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Barb, you seem to be the keeper of the agenda for that meeting, so.
Okay,
Just
Got
if we both write it down, then one of us will remember. So yeah, thanks. We'll definitely raise that. And we've got that meeting with him on August. Okay, anything else from or for the finance committee before we move on? Okay, I believe that HR is next. Charlotte.
And we did not have an HR committee meeting this month, so I do not have any updates.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess they're just for the public's information, there's some information on page 5 and 6 of the previous HR committee meeting topics, which was, I guess, back to our June meeting, including Charlotte's report on the strategic priorities for HR. So we'll go to governance, and Sean, I'm going to turn it to you. And I know that there was the governance committee's report, re-strategic priorities. We didn't quite finish up at governance committee. And I believe the strategic priorities report is here, and there might be some discussion of a couple of items, or at least one from board member Schachter. But Sean, I'll turn it over to you to give any high level report from governance.
Sure, thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah, so just like what Charlotte said, we did governance committee didn't really have a meeting this month either. Actually, we didn't have enough for quorum, so we weren't able to get those activities. So this is going to be June's task list that we're looking at here. Item A, the governance committee's strategic priority. I think there seems to be a bit of a what's the word, a typo, if you will, or an error in terms of the sort of the current progress of a couple of priorities, and I think they were marked down as being complete, if you will, or adjourned. However, board member Schachter, which I'll get him to speak to in a moment, clarified and reminded the board that actually is ongoing, and the wording needs to be revised. So the work to do that, I think we can do that space before us. So before I get to board member Schachter, the other items in the committee last month, of course, or June, sorry, we're looking at the community survey of his results, and of course the board social media account, which itself is not progressing at the moment because we didn't have quorum. So this is going to be reviewed or talked about probably in September, somewhere down the line. So just give a good idea of where that is. This is a high level discussion about it. Well, I'll skip back to A really quickly. So I'll look to board member Schachter. Perhaps you can provide some context, and if you have the wording that you were mentioning earlier, that should be replaced in the specific section of the document. I would appreciate on the board review strategic plan. Sorry, specifically, I would appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And so for the public, if you scroll down through the agenda, we're on page 40 of 53, past all the financial reports. This is where the governance committee quarterly report on priorities is, starting on page 40. And Paul, I believe you had some suggested edits, and the rest of these we got to in finance and HR. We did a check-in, but the governance committee in June, we ran out of time because there's always a lot on that agenda. So Paul, I'm going to turn it to you to make your suggested change for this progress report.
Thank you, Chair. And what I'm referring to is under the governance strategic priorities, it's number 6, item 7, which is to review street checks and other policies that have been identified as contributing to systemic racism and to disproportionate harm to communities that feel unsupported by the police. the suggested revision is this is completed. However, my understanding is it really is not completed. On January 4th, Deputy Chief Watson and I have submitted a informational memo to the board, basically laying out the situation that there are still ambiguities in the data on how police stops that are street checks are recorded. We made 3 major recommendations to the province with respect to their revision of the provincial policy, to upgrading the data management system, and to collecting and reporting disaggregated race-based data. Of course, since then, the legislature has passed a bill that has authorized the collection of disaggregated race-based data, which so this should be there, should be helpful to this. The last thing was that we were expecting more guidance from policing services as to street checks and how to record it and et cetera. So Deputy Chief Watson and I were keeping this on the agenda, and I think it is appropriate for the board to keep this as a strategic priority, as not completed, but continuing to be monitored. There is no immediate action because we are awaiting some action from the province, but we should keep monitoring this and not have it as something that is stricken off our strategic action priorities.
Okay, thank you very much for that. To the governance chair, do you see any challenge with the suggestion that Paul has made, or are you okay to have an amendment to strike, to make that as in progress rather than complete?
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. We could definitely change that to progress and status and to Paul's comments. I have written it down, so I will I'll amend that temporarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to make an amendment to have this as in progress, and then maybe a little bit of wording afterwards, just like all the other in progress ones have?
Yes, I think to be continued to be monitored and awaiting further information from policing services branch as to the approach to street checks.
Perfect. Okay, so the amendment is to make it in progress with that wording afterwards, and Paul is making that amendment. Is there a seconder? Vaughn, thank you. Colette, did you get the wording? Okay, perfect. All those in favor of that amendment? Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much. And this is why we do these quarterly updates from committee, so we can track our work as a board and make sure that we're on track and then publicly report as well. Anything else for governance? Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and I apologize too that we didn't get a chance to review this at committee. But I do have a question regarding the priority number 7, future-proof framework agreement. And we're basically, the bullet says that basically the point is to amend the framework agreement to include the co-chair policy as part of the agreement. And I certainly support that. And a bit of a background on that, of course, that's because after October 15th, we're going to have at least one change in the co-chairs. And I think my personal opinion is that the co-chair model between our 2 mayors has worked so well for the last few years that we hate to see it disrupted with a new mayor or mayors in place. And this is why the suggestion was made that we get made part of the agreement. So the bullet is that the board has determined it's not legally possible to amend the framework agreement in this respect and has reaffirmed their co-chair policy. We ask how it's been reaffirmed.
Through this document here.
Okay, and can it be part of a attachment or addendum to the framework agreement?
Not really. Just because, I mean, we could put it there, we could hand the new co-chairs the framework agreement and the board co-chair policy. The reason that it can't be legally part of the framework agreement, but yeah, no harm in having it as an appendix, but is because the actual initial order in council in 2002, 2003 set out this lead chair or co-chair model with a vice chair or whatever it is, which doesn't even exist in legislation. So basically set it up for failure, in my opinion. And we've, for the past 8 years, navigated this quite successfully. But so, yeah, I think it can't be officially appended, but we can make sure that the new co-chairs, and I think it's the tone of the board that will set, you know, like, hopefully Barb will be back and she'll sit down and say, okay, it's my turn to be lead co-chair, and the new mayor of Victoria will say, okay, I'm deputy co-chair, here's the board's policy. So I think it's the board's responsibility to just basically impose its policy on the new co-chairs.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I would note that the amended framework agreement in 2014, I think, I don't have the words in front of me, but it did talk a bit about the two chair and co-chair will work together in a co-chair format to come up with the policy. Yeah, but we've done that. So I'm not sure why it can't be attached as an amendment.
Yeah, Barb?
I'm just wondering whether, Colette, it's included in the orientation package for members of the board, inclusive of a chair.
Yes, all the board members have access to that policy.
And we have initiated a process whereby people have to check off that they've read this stuff.
Thank you. That's fine.
But I think Doug's suggestion is a good one. I mean, even though we can't officially amend the framework agreement, why not just make it an unofficial appendix to the framework agreement? So anytime anyone reads the framework agreement, they see the board's policy with respect to the co-chairs attached. That's probably the strongest thing we can do. I don't think we need a motion to do that because there's no new direction. The co-chair policy has been approved by the board and reaffirmed. So Paulette, can you just make sure that, you know, even right in the PDF of the framework agreement, that the co-chair policy is part of it as an appendix? And if anyone challenges us, we'll say that we are not really officially amending it, but we want this to be an important part of what accompanies the framework agreement. Okay, great. Thank you. That's a really good suggestion, Doug. Okay, anything else on committees? All right, we'll move to board co-chairs update. And Barb, do you want to talk about the upcoming meeting with Wayne Rideout?
We have a biannual meeting with Wayne Rideout, Director of Police Services, and that is scheduled for August 3rd.
Perfect. And so far the agenda items include, what was the one that we just added to it?
We have 2 agenda items right now. One is JIBC funding challenges, and the other is conflict of interest discussion regarding the co-chairs on arbitration.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll report out to the board in our September meeting about what was discussed with the Director of Police Services. The other thing that we need to do as part of the board co-chairs update is officially, because the board's schedule is set by motion, we need to make an amendment to the board's meeting schedule. The October board meeting is scheduled for 3 days after the municipal election. The results won't be ratified by then. And so the suggestion is to change the board meeting date till October the 25th. At that time, I'm not sure about Esquimalt. At that time, the new Victoria mayor will not yet have been sworn in. That doesn't happen until November the 3rd, but nonetheless, I think the results will be confirmed by that time, because the results are confirmed 10 days after the municipal election. So with the board's discretion, it would be good, I think, to have a motion to move the October meeting from the 18th to the 25th of October for those reasons. Sean is moving that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Doug. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And noting that the new mayor in Victoria will not officially. Right. Okay, but you'll already be sworn in as a police board member, but the new Victoria mayor won't be sworn in as a police board member yet. So the board will just have to, I guess, have some grace in letting that new co-chair attend without officially being sworn in. Yeah, Doug?
I wonder if I can ask a clarifying question on that. I probably completely misunderstood this, but I thought the election was October 15th, but your term ends December 31st.
No, our term in Victoria, the new count, like it ends at 11 o'clock on November the 3rd. Yeah,
Which in the case of this meeting, would have you attending this meeting, not the new mayor.
right, which doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, but that's because you're the mayor still.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for the new mayor to jump right in, particularly
We'll
with,
need to resolve that as a board. We'll have to resolve whether, how we treat that too.
okay. Sure. Well, I think we should resolve that now because otherwise we may as well just set the meeting for after the new mayors are both sworn in. Like November whatever the next Tuesday after, when's your swearing in, Barb?
It's the same day.
Same day.
No, sorry, ours is on the Monday,
Monday.
first Monday of November.
Okay, so to make it safest then, we could have the swearing in, call it
On the Tuesday.
the first Tuesday of November, essentially. I guess it would be November the 9th. Sorry, we're kind of doing a bit of sausage making here, but this is what it looks like to do our work.
Would that not be a committee's meeting anyway? And so no board meeting in October come directly to the committee's meeting?
Technically, the committee's meeting would be the 2nd, because it's the first.
Okay, so I'm wrong.
I mean, it just depends. Is the board okay with the new mayor of Victoria being here on the 25th, not officially being sworn in? That's really the question. It's up to this board.
I personally have no objection to that.
I just want to check with Colette, is that able to be done? Because I just remember in the past that we've had challenges with some of this in various different elections.
Paulette?
We haven't had this come up for about 8 years, so I'd have to go back and find out what they did.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, at Victoria Council, we got rid of what's called that lame duck meeting. There used to be a council meeting after the election where the old council sat and allegedly made decisions. That doesn't make any sense. And so the spirit of this is that there's no point having a co-chair come back who's not actually going to be the co-chair. Yeah, Doug?
Because the swearing in just doesn't involve the chief.
Yes, but the person couldn't officially be sworn in as the co-chair before they're sworn in as mayor.
Oh,
My concern is around the confidentiality of it, because they are not yet the mayor. And that's, I think, what Colette has to look up. And should we want to decide this now, we can do it by an email vote. Or should we want to bring it back to September and make the decision, then we will have the information. It's better to be safe and understand the process rather than set up expectations that we, at this point, don't necessarily have all the information.
That's a great point. Why don't we, so I see Charlotte's hand and then we don't need to make this decision today. Why don't we, after we hear from Charlotte, postpone consideration of the board meeting schedule until our September board meeting, and we'll get that information from Colette. Charlotte, go ahead.
I think this is a really interesting conversation, and I really looked for Colette for that, the guidance on officiality. But I think if we have an incoming mayor who will be a part of our board, what if while we're waiting to hear from Colette, that we just plan to have that new elected mayor attend the public portion of the meeting, and there we could say, if Colette comes up and realizes we can't have them at the other portions, and then at that meeting just say we want to welcome this person who's not officially sworn in but will most likely be joining our board. Does that sound reasonable?
That totally
Yes.
sounds reasonable. That's a great suggestion. Okay, so we'll flag that for ourselves for September, and in September we'll have information. And if the board member, the new chair, co-chair can't officially attend because of confidentiality and risk and all those things, we'll go with Charlotte's suggestion that they can attend the public meeting, and we'll make that determination in September. Good. Okay, so if to be official here, very good process. We need a motion to postpone consideration of the schedule change to the board's agenda. Thank you, Charlotte. Is there a seconder to postpone that till September board meeting? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Okay, we move on to the BC Association of Police Boards Directors update, and Charlotte, that's back to you.
Thank you. So we had our conference a couple of months ago, and we haven't had a meeting since. And since it's summertime, I don't really have much to mention. I'm sure in September, all the things that have been put off that will land back on our desks in the fall should have a bigger update.
Great, thank you. Yes, it is the middle of the summer, and appreciate that people are wanting a bit of a break. Next is an opportunity for board member engagement update, and this is for members of the board who have engaged as members of the board in various community events or activities. There's no obligation to share, but if anyone has anything to share, now is the time to do so. Yeah, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to the blessing this morning, which I was honored to attend, I did have an opportunity with my grandchildren from Toronto to attend the Vic West Festival in early July, and the police department had their information hiring booth there. I gave me an opportunity to introduce myself to the really, really nice folks there. But the important thing was my young grandchildren all got all kinds of bling, including stock for the bicycle, so they really appreciated that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to give an update? Yeah, Barb?
Yeah, I'm trying to pick out the date that we had the block party in the Esquimalt, and Vic PD was there. I think it was in June, early June, was it not? Anyways, it was a successful event between holding off the rain, and it was a good attendance. So thank you very much for being there.
Okay, thank you for that. The framework agreement is just here for our information. And again, in future, we'll now have the co-chair's policy appended as part of the framework agreement, but there's no action on this unless anyone has any questions or comments or issues to raise. Okay, I don't see any. So we'll move on to new business, and I'm going to turn to Inspector McCrae, who's the head of HR. Inspector, please go ahead.
Thank you. As you can see in your package, you have just an update on some different hiring, which we really have already touched on the hiring side. And there is also some promotions in there. We have just concluded our sergeant to staff sergeant, pardon me, constable to sergeant promotion process, just concluded at the end of May, early June. A number of promotions occurred out of that. Obviously, some very good people that we're promoting and who are very excited. And further, we have are in the midst. So once that concluded, we started a staff sergeant to, sergeant to staff sergeant promotion process, which is also now ongoing. Just unfortunately, the way that the summer worked out and the chief and the deputies needing to be on the interview panels for those, that won't conclude actually until the middle of September. But obviously some positive steps going forward there, and happy to take any questions relating to the report as you see it.
Thank you, Inspector. And for the public, we're on page 45 of 53 of the agenda. Are there any questions? Yeah, Barb, go ahead.
Thank you, Inspector. What are we seeing in terms of promotion of diversity and gender equity?
Good question. You may recall, and I believe we spoke about this in our last round of promotion processes, that we did two things. We made some modifications to our promotion process to ensure that we weren't putting any unexpected or artificial barriers in place that prevented us from making sure we were seeing equity in terms of those applying and competing for promotion. Further to that, we have also asked the internal EDI committee to take a look at our promotion processes as well. And I know that is one of the first things that they will be considering, amongst others, some, key administrative things that they need to do as their team gets going further. But as we, so they will be considering and looking at those in short order. In the promotion side of the house, we had a total of 8 candidates identified for promotion to the rank of sergeant. I'd have to look back. I actually don't have in front of me the diversity of the makeup of those people. In this particular case, all of them happen to be male. In our sergeant to staff sergeant promotion process, as I mentioned, it won't be concluded until I think it's actually the 3rd week of September. We do have representation from a variety of different, both ethnic backgrounds as well as male, female makeup. And when we have that, I can let you know what the results are.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one. I noticed that there are 4 reserve constables who have resigned. So 2 questions. One, are they resigning to go to the Justice Institute and become police officers? Because I know that does happen sometimes. And if so, how many of those 4 have transitioned to become Vic PD officers? And if not, any sense, not to get into personal information or anything, but is it that their time is up, or that just, a sense of what the movement is both up and out from the Reserve Constable program?
Yeah, as we've spoken about before, the Reserve Constable program is not only a great resource for us to recruit and hire, but it's also a great resource for other police agencies. Now, we want to obviously make sure we get first crack at those people and first opportunity to hire them. Of the 4 who've resigned on this particular list, we have 2 that we did hire for constable positions. The other 2, I actually don't know. I would have to check with our Reserve Constable Coordinator, Ryan Wilson, and determine why they moved on. But it is not uncommon in that field for them to do a year or 2, be hired elsewhere, or also relocating to different locations, literally just not just here in Victoria, but outside of our city. So I would have to follow up with him to find out.
Yeah, that's fine. I was mostly interested in how many became Vic PD officers, and so maybe just as a going forward, because they're not really promotions, because Reserve Constable isn't really a promotion to constable, but maybe just when in the resignation section, when there are Reserve Constables quote unquote resigning to become Vic PD officers, maybe just making a note of that so that people like me don't ask the same question every time.
You bet. Colette will remind me to look that up for you and have that included.
Because I think that's a success, right? People.
I agree with you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we're going to move on then to roadmap to a healthy and inclusive workplace. And this came, I believe, in draft in May. And Colette, I think, is this here for the board's final consideration and ratification today? Is that correct?
Sorry, which document?
The roadmap for healthy and inclusive workplace.
Colette, I can provide an update.
Yes, yeah, the chief can take it, thanks.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Yeah, so Chair, as you know, this document is always a living document. If you recall, the board had asked for some outcomes, some expected outcomes, which we kind of have added in there. Happy to make minor adjustments to the report because it is a living document, but it's really important that the board receives regular updates on some of the progress that we're making under the 3 areas. First one being mental health and wellness, second one, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the third one is leadership. And I'm happy to walk the board to the report.
Okay, thank you. I want to know, have we as a board adopted this?
The board did adopt it, other than the board asked for some expected outcomes to be added to each of
Okay,
the
perfect. I just wanted to make sure that we had adopted it. Okay, that's great. So I don't know that we need to be walked through. Maybe I'll just, as chair, make a couple of comments, which is, and I already sent this to the chief and the deputies. I think this really, based on all the work and all the research that's happened with surveys and asking members for their input, that this really does hit the mark in terms of where we want to go as an organization and the care we take for our people and the work to become an organization where equity, diversity, and inclusion become a bit of a North Star, because that is the way the world is going. I also really like and would encourage for this to continue, that we don't need a monthly update. I think that would be over the top. But a quarterly update, and to keep it as a rolling update, so we can see what happened in May. Okay, then we look forward to July, and then October and January, or whatever it is, to always have and it'll become a long document over time, but to always have kind of that rolling update, so we can see progression. I think the work is really is good, and will create the kind of department that we want to create based on the feedback we've received from members. I do have a couple of proposed changes, and I sent these to the chief and deputies in advance. I think under number 1, expected outcome in bullet 1, I think that can be struck because it's an action, and the action's already listed there. So I think when we have the outcomes that are actions, it just isn't necessary. So I'll just go through my suggestions, and then if someone who is able to make an amendment is able to do so, that would be great. Also, under number 1, I would say that create a joint committee. The committee may be completed, but the work is going to be ongoing. So I would propose that we would change that timeline number under number 1 to ongoing, because that's really important work that will continue on an ongoing basis. And so too with item number 2 under equity, diversity, and inclusion. Again, it's the creation of a committee. The creation of the committee might be complete, but the work is ongoing. So I think it should be signaled as such. So I am not able to make amendments because that's the nature of being the co-chair. But if someone would be willing to propose those amendments to the document, thanks, Doug. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Paul. Yeah, the motivation is just to keep this document as fresh and crisp and alive as possible. And with those 3 changes, I think it continues to work in that spirit. The rest of it, I think, is just really strong. We vote on the amendment, and then I'll look for other speakers. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I know I jumped right in with that, but this has been really important work that's been achieved, and I wanted to begin to recognize it. Other thoughts? Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Just a clarification from the chief in terms of the reports on what's been going on. It's not clear to me whether a facilitator has been identified and hired yet.
For EDI?
Yeah.
Yes.
For EDI.
I will ask Deputy Chief Jason Lakeman to provide you an update, because he's a champion in this area.
Short answer is no. The long answer is we've done a consultation piece. I'm seeking advice from another police agency. That police agency is presenting tomorrow, actually, on how they started their EDI committee, tomorrow to our EDI committee meeting. And then I've lined up a presenter from a consultation agency, I think, for the August meeting. And I'm meeting with our finance people to navigate the request for proposal map, or what we need to go about to actually get a consultant in place for that.
I think it is really important that, it's having a trained expert as a facilitator in this committee, as the committee is already engaging in an action. I mean, I think it's critical, because I don't think, most deriving a committee internally, we're not going to have the resources to be able to understand all of the issues that we have in terms of the gender and race and other issues that are there. So I think I noticed that there are actions already happening, and we talked about review of the promotions, but I think it is really critical that we have an expert consultant facilitator in place.
There were a couple of priorities that I wanted. One was the promotion, obviously, the priority. In our very first meeting, Mr. Schachter was actually we spent an hour and a half discussing our backgrounds and getting to know each other. Because a group like this, if it's going to actually be successful, in my opinion, it's going to be successful, we have to be comfortable with each other before we bring somebody else in as well. So we're going to have about 3 meetings under our belt before we actually meet with a consultant. And the group actually has to know, okay, they have to be able to, with help, frame up what kind of scope we're going to be looking at. So I don't disagree with any of your statements, but I certainly wanted a familiarity exercise, a trust building exercise or two before we actually get into that facilitated discussion.
Sure. I would, if I may, Chair, I would just be concerned, for example, at finalizing a draft of the charter and mandate without having expert consultation involved, because while, we have a lot of capabilities internally, have the expertise of EDI is, it's a specialized expertise. And, even though people have organizational expertise, et cetera, they may not have all the specialized that. So I would just be concerned that we finalize, charters and mandates without having some advice and consultation.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, anything else on the healthy and inclusive workplace? So I don't think we need to make a motion to have a quarterly update on this in the form of a rolling update. That can just, we'll just make sure that happens. Okay, excellent. That is it. Just to note, there are two pieces of correspondence. One is a letter from Esquimalt to Police Services, the Justice Institute of BC Transition Funding. I'll note that there is also a letter coming from Victoria Council. And then the second is a list of all the commendations that our officers have received. And we really want those there for public information as well. But unless anyone has any other business, I need a motion to adjourn. I will note for the public, we do not have a board meeting in August. So for those of you who watch either in real time or look for them afterwards, we'll be back in September. With that, a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, Doug. Seconded by